Hello. It's been a very long time since I've done any kind of video or podcasty thing like I usually sometimes do recordings as I'm driving home from gigs late at night, mostly as a way of staying alert and feeling like I've got someone to talk to on a long journey home. But I had a bit of a story to tell and I was keen to share it, and this one has some visual elements to it. So I thought, what better way to do it than as a video? So I've got some props. I've got a hopefully which will all make sense, but first I need to do some explaining. But penknife, a screwdriver, some creepy sex pest gloves. Those will hopefully make sense in a bit, and a magnet. But all of this will hopefully make sense in a bit. But first of all, to kind of give some background about how I got to the point where I had something that I wanted to share as a cool story. And first of all is that obviously playing the drums a lot, I watch a lot of videos related to drumming, mostly on YouTube, either drum tutorials, drum covers to understand how to play particular songs, but also a lot of drum restoration and drum fixing videos. So people like David R and Mike Malone, guys who record videos of themselves buying and doing up cheap drums and or taking really old vintage drums and refreshing them or whatever they might be. And so I watch a lot of those, and there was a brief period at the point when I was being made redundant in the middle of last year, when about 48 hours, maybe slightly longer, the dream was, well, could I do my current day job part-time and also spend a bit of time doing fixing up drums and selling those on and acting as a bit of a drum tech? Truth is, no, I could not. I like the talent of all these guys that do this stuff full time, but also that definitely not pay the bills living in southeast of England. So that dream went by the wayside. But I still really enjoy watching all these videos. And there is still the possibility that one day I might actually have enough space at home to have some kind of workshop and be able to fix up old drums and do fun things like that. But in the meantime, I'll mostly just entertain myself with watching videos of other people doing it, and at least learning a little bit along the way. And one of those drums or videos I specifically want to call out is the guys I just referenced earlier, which is a guy called Mike Malone. Really cool dude. He seems like this really chilled out, very laid back, very softly spoken drummer. Clearly a hard-working musician. He does loads of session stuff, plays in events bands, does music lessons, he does recording sessions for other local musicians, and of course has this YouTube channel that he runs where he's educating about playing the drums, or he's talking about how he sets up his kit, or how he has actually built his own kit at some point as well, which was a super cool series of videos. And one of the drums that he's a massive fan of is the Ludwig Acrolite, which is for those of you who don't know, is a fairly shallow shell vintage. Well, they first started appearing in the 60s and 70s. Vintage series of Ludwig aluminium shelled snares that were kind of a cheap and cheerful thing that I think that Ludwig produced originally. I don't know the full history of it. This video is not going to be a history lesson, by the way, just so you know. I'm going to talk out my arse half the time, but don't worry about that. Mike Malone is a super big fan of those, and a lot of he's got a few videos of buying older acrolite snares and fixing them up. And it seems to be the case that certainly if you live in the US, there are a lot of these snares were produced, and therefore if you keep your eyes open and know where to look, you can sometimes pick up a real bargain of a snare that could be in a state where it could be do a little bit of work on it. You can fix it up and actually turn it into something that's either worth a bit of money or is just nice to play on it in its own right. And historically, I hadn't always been the biggest fan of these acrolite snares. Whenever I heard recordings of them, I thought they had a little bit too much of the thing that's aluminium snares are famous for is having like a dry sound, like a sort of to me it sounds a bit like a bark. It's kind of it's hard to describe until you actually hear it. Actually, weirdly, if you take an aluminium drink can and tap it, and it's got a slightly dead kind of low ring to it, and weirdly, if you touch aluminium cans like as you're drinking them to your lips or to your tongue, there's a dry sensation to it, and that dry sensation almost comes across in the sound of the drums. It's hard to explain, but it's kind of there. Anyway, I hadn't always been a big fan of these snares, so it was interesting to watch, but not something that I would ever actually particularly act upon because it wasn't something I was a fan of. Then, relatively recently, one of the rehearsal spaces that my band uses upgraded all their gear to some very high-end drum kits as the backline that you can rent when you go there to rehearse, including a aluminium snare with all of their kits. So they are British Drum Company Lounge and Legend series drums, which are like £3,000 worth of drum kit. Then they have one of their Aviator snares that you can also rent as well. So that's like another 400-500 quid worth of snare that you can just go along and rent. And when we needed to learn some new songs for the band, and we went along to use that rehearsal space, I obviously snapped the opportunity to at least try out these British Drum Company kits. And I was actually quite impressed with the snare. It did have that aluminium-y kind of like dry sound, and the one that was in the room, I didn't fiddle with the tuning on it. It was tuned very high, which is not really how I like my snares to sound, but it was distinct enough that I thought, well, that's kind of cool actually. It might be nice to have a snare that's like that and would be a different sound to all the other snares that I've got. And I am starting to build up a bit of a collection, which might become a problem. And of course, my all-time favourite drummer is John Bonham, and he didn't play acrylite snares. He played a different Ludwig aluminium shelled snare. He played the Superphonics. His one was the series that's sort of above the acrylites. The LM400 and the LM402 are aluminium bodied with a chrome plating on them. Beaded shell with like a bead around the middle of the snare, and instead of the acrylites being 8 lugs, which gives you a slightly more open sound, the LM400 and LM402 were 10 lug, so slightly more controlled sound, and those are the snares that, as I say, John Bonham used throughout most of the recording for Led Zeppelin. So, kind of again started thinking, well, maybe I should look at an aluminium snare and see what's available out there, and maybe do something a bit like guys like Mike Malone and R. David R. do, and record myself doing one up. Unlikely to be able to do as professional a job as them. I don't have the gear to do the proper sort of like fix up of it, but it might be fun to do in my spare time. So I started looking into acrylites in the first instance, knowing that it's possible, certainly based on those videos I'd watched so far, was that it's possible to get a super cheap one of those. Anyway, as it turns out, that is not the case in the UK. Those drums were very prevalent in the US and are 10 penny to pick up if you know where to look now. But come over here to the UK and pretty much everyone who's got a vintage acrylite knows what they've got. And those are actually holding their price surprisingly well. If you go then to look at the chromed step up, more flash, particularly the Ludwig ones, the LM400s and the LM402s, those are even more, and you'd be looking at spending even for an old ratty one of those, you'd be looking at spending probably 300-400 quid, if not more. And so I was like, oh, okay, well maybe that's not going to work out. Then I did see a post on Facebook Marketplace on one of the drum selling sites that I'm a member of. There was a guy who was posting a Sonor compressor 14.5.7 inch snare that looked really nice. And Sonor, I've never played any Sonor gear, but it always looks like so well engineered. And I was like, oh, okay, that would be really cool. And he was selling that like again about half the price it would have been new, and he said he barely played it and it looked in immaculate condition. I was super tempted by that, and I was like umming and ahhing about it, and I was in these meetings and I was looking at this snare and I was like and then and so I finally got in touch with him. He was like, do you know, I've just sold it to somebody else. So anyway, kept looking, and a bit more research, and I found one thing I did find was that Premiere, the UK drum company, were also producing around the same time that Ludwig started making the LM400 snares. In response, Premier started producing their own version of that snare. So very similar construction, aluminium shell with a chromed on the exterior, 10 lugs, a beaded shell, so it was a little bit tougher, giving a sound that apparently, to experts, is very, very similar to those Ludwig Supraphonics, which sounds super cool if you ask me. So I started then looking into, well, could I pick up one of these Premier 35 series snares, as they're called. And there was one that was available which had new heads and new snare side skins on it. Came with a case. Was in reasonable nick with the chrome. So one of the things that with aluminium doesn't hold particularly well to chrome. So I was looking at it thinking the chrome was a little bit flaky in places, but maybe I could do a little bit of work to kind of like buff that up and polish it, and you know, that might be a fun part of buying an older snare and fixing it up. And there was one of these that was hovering around the £230 mark for a Premier, and I was like, that's half of the price, at least half of the price of what an equivalent Ludwig snare would be. That might be quite fun to own. And I was hovering over it, I was like, and then I missed out on that Sonor snare, and I was like, okay, I'm starting to think maybe I should just treat myself. Anyway, keeping looking, I then thought, well, let's just search for aluminium snares. Not specify a brand, not specify a size, not specify, the status of it or anything like that. Let's just have a look and see what I can find. And a name that I hadn't come up in my research popped up in a search, which was a Beverly Cosmic 21, which is, looking at it, a remarkably similar looking snare to the Premier 35 series that I was looking at. And it turns out that the Beverly was another UK based drum company, and they were the original company that actually released this chrome over aluminium 10 lugged version of these snares, these responses to the Ludwig snares that were coming out of the UK. So when those first were being sold, they were actually originally badged as Beverly Cosmic 21s. Apparently the 21 names because it came from the fact that they were £21 at the time. And there was one of those for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and he was only asking 180 quid for it. And it had new skins on it, and it also came with a case. And it also looked in suspiciously good nick as well. And I was like, well, surely that can't be right. And I stared at it, and I stared at it, and I stared at it. Anyway, to make a long story even longer, I've got a box. So let's open this box and see what happens. And I am going to put my Sex Pest gloves on now, just in case, because I've too much detail, but I've shaved my head over, and then I put a moisturiser on. My hands are probably really oily and greasy, and I don't want oil and grease on a vintage snare drum. So let's see what we've got. Kind of cool. I bought some gloves to be able to do jobs on. And let's see if I can do this without doxing my address, which is on the lid of this box. Let's do that. Try not to slice myself either. This is a good telly, this, isn't it? Middle-aged man opens box. There we go. Ooh, sugar. Now, it comes with a case, and he said it was a LeBlanc style case, which I've never owned one of those. I've always just been soft cases, and that looks quite cool. Let's have a quick look. Bit of weight there. That's pretty cool. If somebody says to me, "Oh, this drum comes with a really old case," I'd be like, "It's going to be knackered, isn't it?" But that's in surprisingly good nick. And there's a story there. It probably isn't coming across because of the lighting, but there's some text on there that says, it says Ludwig LM 400 1970. And it's written on the outside of this hard case. So it's the same here as well. It's kind of written in like marker pen or something like that. I don't know what the story is there. Let's have a look inside. Undo this strap. That's how you open these, isn't it? Yes, it is, yeah. Okay, here we go. Let's do it the right way around. No, that is the right way around. Take the lid off. I should say, actually, the chap who was selling this seemed like a really nice guy. He was really responsive and chatty on as we were exchanging messages, and he was saying, "Oh, you know, it's a lovely snare, and they sound really good." Let's see. Now, in the pictures, as I say, aluminium famously doesn't hold its chrome very well, and in the pictures, this looked suspiciously good. Here's my case. I had some bubble wrap on it, and then also what appears to be a very old manky t-shirt. It smells clean. Let's have a look. Whoa. 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 Let's have a look. You know, the chrome on that, there is a tiny bit of pitting, but from what I can see, that is not I expected it to be flaking a little bit, but there are some tiny little spots of pitting. I don't know if that's showing very well on the camera, but that is barely marked at all. And the rims are super clean. They're not pitted at all, they're not rusted. There's no rust or anything on the rims. He's put new set of pure sound snare wires on, and he's got new heads on, and this is one of the things that also actually kind of tipped the deal for me, was he's put my choice of snare heads, which is an Evans EC reverse dot on the batter side, and an Evans 300 snare side. So he's for the price thrown in for the price of the snare. He's actually put the heads on that I would have put on if I had the choice. I can't see the condition of it, but the muffler, you can see the muffler is in place. It looks to be working. Yeah, that's present and correct. It looks to be working. That. I don't know if I've stumbled. This is freakishly. That snare is a throw off. It is very good. It's, by the way, it's quite late at night here, and I'm in the conservatory at the back of our house, so my neighbours won't love me if I probably hit this. There's a couple of little scratches here and there, but nothing that I bet wouldn't buff out with a bit of polish. I don't know how well that comes across, but the original Beverly script logo is on there. Apparently these are famously, I won't touch it too much because those are apparently very, very flaky and break easily. And the guy said on the advert that it was stamped inside the shell. Let's have a look. I can't see anything. But the chap said that the inside of the shell was stamped in 1972. Which, if that's the case, this drum is older than me. And is in slightly better nick, it has to be said. Now I will say, looking on the inside of the bearing edge, it's ever so slightly ratty inside there, but probably just needs a bit of a clean. Nothing worse than that. Now the only thing, now I did say I said I'd come on to it, only thing that makes me I do wonder about is whether, could this possibly be, could this not be a chrome over aluminium, could be something else, but that's what the magnet is for. Does it stick? Well, we know it's not a steel shell then, let's have a look, yeah, look, the magnet, my son's Otter magnet, sticks to the rims, which I assume are steel, but magnet does not at all stick to it. So unless it's a brass shell, this is a chrome over aluminium shell. Wow. Whoa. This thing is in absolute time warp condition. Oh wow. The lugs are really nice as well. Really attractive. This is a super cool bit of kit. I am very happy with this. I'm really looking forward to playing this. Skin maybe looks like it's been used a tiny bit, but hardly at all. Only thing that might be a bit of a pain is it's got the original slotted tension rods on it. You can see those. So I'll have to work with that. I will probably end up taking those off and replacing them with some square-headed ones. Snare wires rather than snare straps. I'm not a big fan of using string to hold your snare on, but I mean it works. And if someone else has done the work to set it up for you, it'd be silly to fiddle with it. But I'm probably going to take this whole thing apart and strip it, and like I say, try and get the chrome looking as absolutely as fresh as a daisy if I can, because I think with the fact that this is not flaking at all, I think this will hold up really well to just a very light clean and a bit of a polish, and this thing will come out looking absolutely amazing. Wow. The only other thing possible is whether it's slightly out of round, maybe, and maybe that's why it's a little bit cheap, but it doesn't look like it. Obviously I can't tell with just my bare eye, but to the naked eye it looks really good. Wow. Yes, okay. Anyway, there you go. So a little story there. Story time about watching silly videos online that somehow led for a very long chain of events to maybe I should buy one of those snares. And then continue my quest to desperately attempt to sound like John Bonham. Even though he played a 6.5 inch depth one rather than a 5 inch one. But I have discovered in the last few years that I think for this type of drum, this type of sound, I prefer the slightly more responsive feel of playing a more shallow drum. Whoa, dude, wow. I am super happy with that, and I cannot wait to be able to pull it apart, fiddle with it, maybe have a play with it, and see how it sounds. Anyway, I wanted to share that because I don't often order big exciting things like that, and it is, I think, something super cool and that I can look forward to using. Anyway, cheers. If you have watched all the way through, thank you ever so much, and I'll see you soon. Cheers, bye.